venison tastes different if deer are eating different things. I haven't seen that. I don't have that refined of a palate to tell the difference. I've eaten venison from the St. Lawrence Seaway. I've eaten venison from Eastern Oregon, from Texas, from Florida. I've eaten whitetail venison from all across the country. I cannot discern a difference. I know there are some people who not only claim, I believe they can tell the difference, but that's a refined palate. If you're looking at the way deer eat, what I've heard from people who say they can taste the difference is that the deer in the northern forests that might be eating more acorns, that might be eating more lichens, that woody matter, there's more of a nuttier, bitter, I don't want to say bitter, a more strong flavor to venison. I have not seen that, as opposed to a farm-raised whitetail in the Midwest farm belt, eating corn and soybeans and alfalfa and things like that. The biggest thing for venison flavor, in my opinion, and I think for most seasoned hunters, is how that venison is handled in the field, how is it brought into camp or out of the field, and how is it prepared. And there's a lot of things you have to keep in mind when doing that. So before I get into all the nuts and bolts on how to properly care for that venison so you get the best flavor, a lot of people say, well, they don't like venison because it tastes gamey. Well, let me begin and end that conversation right here. If you have tasted venison for the first time and you thought it tasted gamey, chances are it wasn't either processed properly or it wasn't trimmed out properly before it was served to you, or might have not been cooked properly. But that gamey flavor does not come from the meat itself. The meat itself, if you take a pure piece of venison steak, fresh and processed properly, it's going to be a mild flavor. Yes, it's going to have more texture than beef, pork, chicken, or lamb because it's a wild animal. And that's how meat is supposed to taste. So it's really simple. Right after the kill, you act quickly and decisively. Clean, cold, into the processor, or if you're going to process it yourself. So what I do right at the kill is I will, depending upon how far I have to take that animal, sometimes I will not field dress the deer right there in the field. If I have an opportunity where I can do it back at camp, that means I can process that deer without introducing extra dirt, extra pathogens in the field, especially if I have to drag the deer out. If I'm processing it in the field, I'm going to field dress it quickly. I'm going to get all the intestines, the blood, all the bloodshot, all the bad stuff out of the deer as cleanly as possible and transport it as cleanly as possible. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, depends on the weather. If it's cold out, I don't have to rush. Mother Nature is going to help me with that. If it's not cold, if it's like today and it's nice and warm in the 70s, then I have to make sure that I get that either in a cooler quickly or get it on ice quickly or get it to a processor quickly. So that's the two things. Number one, clean. Number two, cold. I will wash out that inside of that carcass almost every single time. A science to that as well, because if you introduce water, you're going to introduce the potential for spoilage, because water and heat are not a good thing because that increases bacterial growth. So what I do there is I will rinse that deer out, I will pat it dry with paper towels, and I will get it cold as soon as possible. Sometimes that means packing the inside of that chest cavity with ice if I have to let it go overnight, or getting it into a walk-in cooler as quickly as possible, or if it's cold outside, just hanging it and let that body heat escape as quickly as possible.
I'm just in the process of setting up a bow for my son, who's 13, and you're always looking for products that are pretty much fail-safe. I chose the Easy Rest from True Glow. What I like about it, it's a full capture rest, so it's gonna hold that arrow. It really isn't going to allow, if the bow is canted a little bit, it's not gonna fall off the arrow rest, because let's face it, in the moment of truth, when that big whitetail's coming in, he's gonna be shaking. I've already seen it. I've got 3 other kids that are bow hunted, and I've seen it firsthand in the tree, so full capture is the way to go for any child. But if, it's a great arrow rest for anyone, even myself. I know a lot of you guys that have never shot this type of rest really worry about the bristles. because you think it's going to knock down a ton of speed, because literally it's touching the arrow rest in multiple contact points, right? And us old guys have learned that that's a bad thing, but in this case, those bristles are so soft that it really doesn't slow down speed. I've shot through a chronograph myself. You're gonna lose 2 to 3 feet per second, but that's it. I mean, that's minimal. And to have the assurance of that arrow staying in place and not having to worry about it fall off the arrow rest, it's a great way. It also keeps your young archer from bad habits, because when I started bow hunting, I always held my finger up. You always worry about cutting your finger with your broadhead or any of that stuff. If you want the most simple arrow rest out there, check out the Easy Rest from True Glow. You won't be disappointed.